y'all, welcome back to For the Sake of a Generation podcast. I'm so excited for our episode today. I have some girls from my team with me, and we are just going to do a Q&A from the questions that they sent us. So this week, we're going to be talking about dating relationships. So you guys send in questions, and we're going to answer them today. You guys tell them your favorite flavor of ice cream before we start. Jenna, you can go first.
Okay. My favorite flavor of ice cream, this is really specific, but there's an ice cream shop in the town that we live in. I used to work there, fun fact, and they have the best s'mores ice cream of all time, and that is my answer.
That's a good one. Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm going to try. Every weapon may form, but it's not prospering in my house, period. I love mint Oreo ice cream. I don't care if it's controversial. I don't care what anyone says. I also love Moose Tracks. I love Kilwin's blueberry waffle cone ice cream. That's my final answer. I love it. It's the best. Period.
My favorite is chocolate cookies and cream. Just because my mom always used to buy that when I was a kid.
Good.
My grandma makes that. My grandma makes it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to try it.
My favorite is... I had it. Oh, it's peppermint from Kilwin's. They only have it at Christmas time. It's different from like a mint chocolate chip. It's just different, and it's so good. And it has like red and green like peppermint things in it. So good.
Love.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that important information out of the way, the first question is, what is Christian dating? Which I think is so good. Like, we want to talk about Christian dating, but first we're going to define it. So what is Christian dating? Does it have rules, and how does it differ from normal dating?
I think, like, it's so hard to define something when you're, like, when you already have, like, preconceived notions of what it is, or, like, if you're in it. Like, I'm trying to define it as, like, I have no idea what it looks like to even Christian date. So it's, like, obviously, like, Christian dating is dating with the goal of keeping Christ at the center, which we're going to talk about, like, how you would do that. But I think that was a really good question, like, does it have rules? And I think, like, no, it doesn't necessarily have rules. Like, I don't know, I don't like the word rules. Like, that kind of freaks me out. Like, that would scare me if somebody was like, here's the rules of your dating relationship. Like, it is different than regular dating. Like, I think normal dating is just, like, I don't know, like, the world does dating differently than Christian dating. Like, there are things that the Bible instructs us to do in Christian dating. So, not rules, but there are things that are meant to look different about your Christian relationship, but that's just like your walk with the Lord in general, good. You know?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, like, is this a rule book to you? Right. Because if it's a rule book to you, you're missing it. You're missing the whole point. It's a love story to you, right? And so if this is a love story to you and this instructs us to date a certain way and to act a certain way outside of marriage, then it's out of love for us, right? It's not out of, I want you guys to have this rule. Like, why would he do that? You know, why would he make up a rule that's not going to help us? Like, that's just doing nothing for anybody. So there are things, right, that are important when you're dating as a Christian, and it all flows from keeping God at the center. So I love that we're going to talk about that. But when that's in the center, you're going to pursue purity. And you're going to pursue the Lord together and apart. So there are lots of things, and I think we'll kind of get into some of those specifics with the other questions of being equally yoked, like all kinds of things that are important, but they're not rules. They're out of love for you. And just anything the Lord instructs us to do is not because he wants to hold us back. It's because he wants us to be free. And sin entangles us. Sin enslaves us. And so what he wants us to do is to be pure for our own good and for his glory. And so I think to answer, are there rules? The answer is no, like you said. But there is a way to go about it. And I'm thankful for that, because otherwise we'd just be off willy-nilly, looking like the world, when we're called to be set apart. And if we're called to be set apart in all that we do, then that would include dating. And so, that's my answer. Anybody else got anything for that one?
Covered it.
Okay. What are some practical ways that I can keep Christ at the center of my relationship?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, like, prayer. So in my relationship, I'll ask, like, hey, what can I be praying for you this week? And so I keep that on my mind, and just, like, because it could be something that doesn't come up in common conversation, but I know it's something he's thinking about, and that's on his mind. So I want it to be also on my mind when talking to the Lord.
That's good.
That's good. I was going to say two things. I was going to say, number one, reading the word together, like even if you're not reading the same thing, like I think it doesn't have to be like we sit down and we read this word and we talk about it, just like sitting in the same space and reading your own like chapter, book of the Bible, whatever, individually, and coming together and talking about it. And also like off of that, like sharing your heart with each other. Like I think sometimes we just like we feel things, or I know I'm like this, like there are things that are on my heart like so deeply, and it's like sometimes I talk to everybody else about them except my boyfriend. I don't know why. It's just like I don't know, I just don't think to if I've already told like my girlfriends or like my like leaders in church or whatever. But just like sharing your heart with each other, like that leads to spiritual conversation like time and time again. It's like it just keeping Christ at the center. Like my conversations are more Christ-centered when I talk about what's on my heart.
Right, that's good. That's really good. I think when we're trying to keep Christ at the center, inevitably sometimes we end up trying to just not do blank. Just not do this. Just not do that. And in reality, that's like so backwards, and I love that we're getting to talk about the right part, which is what is the goal? Not what am I trying not to do, but what am I trying to do? And what you're trying to do is pursue the Lord both on your own and meet together, right? And that's a holy thing, and that's what marriage is, right? It's you and your spouse and the Lord. And so in dating, you're not called to the same standard that married people are. But like you said, like praying together also, like I think that's something that I've seen be a big game changer for me. Like I'm on the phone with Braden telling him something I'm like super stressed about or mad about or whatever, and I'm like, I just have to stop. Can you just pray for me? And like that is such a sweet moment where we get to invite the Lord into our feelings too. But I think that's a big one, just praying together, which can be intimidating if it's not something you already do. Like, Brayden and I pray in front of each other in group situations where we would normally be praying anyway. But to pray just the two of us together sometimes is awkward, especially starting out, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, agreed.
Emma, what you got? She's cooking over there.
I don't know. I feel like, first of all, like what was the question again? So I actually answer it rather than rant.
What are some practical ways that I can keep Christ at the center of my relationship?
I feel like kind of like what you said, like not focusing on the sin, like that you're maybe doing independently or together, but like focusing on the Lord that like frees you from that sin. I think something practically that like keeps God at the center is like having boundaries. Like obviously physical boundaries are very important, but like even social boundaries, like we're not going to talk about that. That's gonna take us somewhere that's not God honoring. And sometimes that's hard for me because I love to, tell my boyfriend things. So some things aren't always for your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Sometimes that's between you and the Lord, and I think that takes a level of maturity in your faith, but also discernment. Because you could tell them something and it could free them up, or it could maybe brighten their day or lead them closer to God. But sometimes it can confuse them.
That's good.
And I think that's something I'm currently learning. Which is a good thing because you want to kind of figure that out if you're on the road to marriage. Like you want to still have that relationship with the Lord and bring that into your marriage, which I think is important.
Yeah, and that's what it means, like to pursue the Lord separately but together. And I love that because I think like we were saying that, but you totally brought like insight to that. That's so good because like you're not meant to just follow the Lord together, you know? And so you still have that separate intimacy with the Lord. I think that's so good. Okay. What does it mean to be equally yoked? Something you hear a lot in the Christian world. What does that mean? Anyone? Don't all speak at once. I have to find the Bible verse, so y'all gotta go.
Okay, I'll go first. I felt like I had gone first too many times, but I'm just gonna go first again. There's a verse, I think, are you pulling it up, question mark?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Carolyn's going to pull it up, so I'm not going to quote it from memory. But there's a verse that talks about, like, not being yoked with unbelievers, and it's like, I'm not going to get into a whole tangent. That doesn't mean, like, never speak to a believer ever, or an unbeliever ever, but, like, if I am pursuing Christ, like, basically being unequally yoked means, it doesn't always mean that you're dating an unbeliever. Maybe you're dating a believer, but they're just, y'all are on different levels with the Lord, you know? And I would say, like, especially, like, if you're trying to pursue Christ and you're dating someone that doesn't believe in the Lord at all, like, that is so difficult. Like, that person cannot push you towards the Lord because they don't know the Lord. Like, it's so damaging. And so it's not just, like, once again, the Lord saying, don't do this because I don't want you to. It's a rule. It's, like, genuinely him protecting us and guarding our heart because that's so dangerous for us.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that verse she was referring to is 2 Corinthians 6:14, and it says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness?" Because we know that light and darkness cannot coexist, right? And I think that's so good, but I think to understand the concept of being equally yoked, you have to understand what that means, because for so long, I heard that word, and y'all probably know what I'm saying when sometimes you hear this word, and you hear it so often that you just kind of like assign a meaning to it, but you don't actually know what it's talking about at all. Like if someone said define that word, you couldn't. Right. But if someone like gave you a sentence in it, you could like figure out what the sentence means. And that's kind of how it was with the word yoked for a long time. And so I wanted to talk about that. So in biblical times, like as oxen are pulling a load, right? They're carrying a load. There was this thing that went across both of them, and that was the yoke. It's what connects them and connects them to what they're pulling. And so if you think about it, to be unequally yoked, say that this oxen is 2 feet tall and this one's 8 feet tall, that's not, like, one person's carrying all the weight. Right. And that was so good to me. Once I could, like, actually picture that in my head, I was like, well, duh, that's not gonna work. Like, it's not gonna work unless they're both the same height, the same strength, pulling with the same effort. Like, there's so much that has to go into that. And so, yes, that verse is talking about being equally yoked with, like, believers. But there's also, like, even if you're just a little bit off, right? That's gonna cause you to stumble, to disagree, to, hey, I'm pulling this weight, what are you doing? Like, you're not helping me as much as you should be. And so there's just a lot that comes from that. Like, yes, it is not honoring to the Lord when we are in unequally yoked relationships, especially like stepping into marriage with that. But more than anything, it's causing unnecessary strife.
Right. That's good. And I love that, like, they're, like, both of those, like, if they're oxen, like, if they're different, like, they're still both oxen. Right. Like, we can still both be believers, but it's, like, if one's 2 foot tall and one's 8 foot tall, like, you know, in the concept of, like, us following the Lord, like, that causes big problems. Like, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah. You have something to add?
I actually recently studied this concept of, like, basically, the different Gospels have, like, different faces of an angel. And in Luke, his angel face is an oxen because Luke is Jesus portrayed as, like, the role reversal where, like, the humbled are made proud and the proud are made humble. And Jesus is portrayed as, like, this oxen that's carrying our weight, of our sin weight. And, like, we know, I cannot remember the scripture, but the only scripture in the whole Bible that talks about God's heart directly is his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And so when it says, like, unequally yoked, it's like you're carrying God's yoke. Like, like, if you seek the kingdom, like, that's what I'm thinking of. Like, if you're living out God's will, it's like he will be there with you, and it's easy because he's powering you through that. Right. And if you're in a relationship with somebody that's also doing that, it's going to be even easier because, like, God's with both of y'all, it's going to make the journey so much more easy. That's good. If you're outside of that, it's going to be harder to pull that weight. Right. Your own sin weight, you can't. God has to help you through it, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Good. So good. Okay, so if you are in an unequally yoked relationship, what do you do?
That's good. I have so much to say.
Get it?
I think it's hard because there's not always one right answer. Like, I can't, like, look at your situation and say, yep, that's it. Break up with them. It's time to go. But number one, here's some things I will say. We have to stop treating our dating relationships like their marriage. I think sometimes we're like, this is it. I can't leave. I'm trapped. No, you're not. You can leave. You can walk away. Like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, you can walk out of that. Like, you're not bound there. And if you're in a relationship for the sole purpose of, well, I can make him a Christian, I can turn him, it's time to go. Please get
Yeah.
out. You can't do it. You can't make anybody be anything. That works 0.01% of the time. Like, it's so little that happens.
Right.
So I would say that, number one, don't just stay for the sake of, well, I'm here, I have to stay. You don't. And I would also say be prayerful about it. Like, not just, I'm going to ask Emma what Emma thinks. And I'm going to ask Caroline what she thinks. And I want to know what Grace thinks. It's like, what does the Lord say? Because the Lord will answer you.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we would rather seek out our friend's opinion. It's like, well, she said it's okay, so that's fine. Or she doesn't like him, so it's time to go.
Yeah.
But seek out what the Lord has for you. And be willing to receive the right answer. Like, I think sometimes we show up to the Lord and we're like, I just need clarity. Yeah. And then we get it and we're like, oh, I'm still not sure. I don't know. Maybe,
There's no it's like that.
Right, like we leave church and we're like, oh, but I don't know if that was fair. Like, that's not really my obedience. It's like when the Lord answers, it's time to move.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's so good. And I think, I love what you said about run to the Lord and not just your biblical community, but I think there's also a space for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that I've really learned in the past year. There's two parts to that. Number one, if you're in a dating relationship, the people who get to speak into your life and every other aspect should not be kept out of speaking into your relationship.
That's right.
And if you can't handle them being honest with you there, like, you have an issue there. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe it's idolatry, maybe it's something else. I don't know.
That's good.
But there's an issue if the people who get to speak into every other thing in your life can't speak into your relationship. But with that being said, I think the way that I'm learning to view what other people say is as confirmation.
Yeah.
Like, once I've got my answer from the Lord and I'm in that phase of doubting it, then when Emma says, hey, Caroline, like, this doesn't look right. Like, I think this is not where you should be. Then I'm like, well, the Lord already told me that, and the Lord has used you to confirm that. And I think that's such a good, like, role of where things should be, because the answer is not the biblical community doesn't have a role and a place. The answer is that it just falls under the Lord.
Yep, that's good.
And I think also it's so much easier to ignore the Lord's voice than to ignore your friend's voice.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you can walk out of church and pretend you never heard it.
Yeah.
And just block them out.
Right.
But if I'm saying, hey, Jenna, like, I'm talking to you about this, we're having a conversation about it right now, you can't really know as much. So I think there's definitely a space for that, but like you said, it comes after the Lord.
Right.
Like, his will, or his, like, opinion on the matter is what matters.
Right.
And so, I wrote down, like, are they making an effort? Because that's kind of what I think helps you assess the situation. Like, number one, like, if I say, hey, like, my boyfriend is maybe a believer, but not, like, where he needs to be, or we're still not equally yoked. But is he making an effort? Is he showing up? Is he in his word? Is he doing those things? And then number two to that, why is he making an effort? Is it for me or is it for God? Because if it's for me, then that doesn't matter anyway. But because also, like, he or she or whoever is going to get so burned out from trying to do it for you. Yeah. There's nothing in it for them except for earning your approval. And if they're doing it to earn your approval, then they might as well just not do it.
Right.
And so I think, like, assess, is there effort, number one, and number two, who's it for?
Yeah.
Like, whose approval are they trying to seek? And if they're making no effort, then that would be a good sign to me, in my opinion. And if they are, then maybe that's a good time to, like, wait it out. But I would say still, don't move towards marriage. Like, do not go to your wedding day still like, well, I'm just waiting on the Lord to change him. Well, it's your wedding day.
Yeah,
like, don't get stuck, because then you are stuck.
Yeah.
And that is not, like, a reason for divorce that Scripture permits.
Right.
And so, I don't know. Just be careful, but I think that all in all, like, that is what I would look at. Right. That's what my advice would be. However, if the Lord says otherwise in either situation, maybe they're trying their best, but the Lord still says, hey, this isn't your person. Right. Then it doesn't really matter about all the rest. But I'm kind of talking in circles at this point. But
that's good.
Also, off of that, like, I love that you said if they're doing it for you. I think something that I had to learn is that sometimes we want to make somebody something so bad. Like, we think that we can change people, or I can be the one to encourage him or her to become a believer, but really sometimes you need to get out of the way. Like, sometimes I need to remove myself. Like, we think we have so much power, but we don't. It's like, I've literally seen it from personal experience. I step out of the way and the Lord does miraculous things I could never imagine. And I'm like, wow, I'm not the miracle worker here. Like, I can't do anything. As soon as I got out of the way, look what the Lord did. Like, sometimes you're the problem. Like, I hate to say it, but it's like, stop. You're standing in the way of the Lord. It's like, remove yourself and see what the Lord can do.
That's so good.
Hey guys, this is Olivia. Up until this point, the podcast has been completely self-funded by the team, and we've realized through prayer and just conversation with each other that we can't do it alone anymore. There are things that we need that we just don't have the money for, like a video camera and upfront costs of t-shirts and things like that. That we just can't do alone. So we've created a Venmo, and we would love if you guys feel led to give to the podcast at FSG Podcast. It'll be on the screen and in the description. We really love you guys, and we don't take it lightly that you would give money at all. It's really uncomfortable and hard for us to ask for money, but the Lord has given us a lot of peace about this. So if you feel led, we would just love and appreciate it if you would give to the FSG podcast.
Okay, question number 5 is the question you will always get if you're doing a Q&A about relationships, and it is, how do I set boundaries and where is the line? The infamous question. Include scriptures that demonstrate these things if you would like. But yeah, how do you set boundaries and where is the line?
Good.
I have to go.
Yeah, I was gonna say I nominated.
Okay. Here's the thing: is that whenever I was like growing up, I became a Christian in like 7th grade. So like, I was kind of oblivious to some things, but somebody said, like, the line isn't like how far can I go before it's bad. It's like we should be glorifying God together, and that did not make sense to me. Literally, but it did not make sense to me. So I was like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And so I had to learn the hard way. Yeah. And I feel like that is true. Like, don't push the boundary, but like do what glorifies God. But if you don't know what glorifies God in your relationship, then you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But I think there's like 2 sides of the coin, kind of. If you're, this is about to be hard, and I'm sorry. But if it's a good conversation to have. Like, if you're going to start dating, that's an important conversation to have of, like, this is our physical boundary, obviously, and this is, like, different types of boundaries. But if it's, like, the only thing that's, like, coming up of, like, can't we just go a little bit further? Can't we just, maybe I'm not going to be graphic, but, like, if that's, like, constantly a problem, that's a red flag, in my opinion, and that's firm. But it's definitely a good conversation to have. I'm not saying that. The thing is, though, that, like, practically, this is a hard thing to answer, but I feel like recently I've been learning, like, God gave us, like, the desire to want to be intimate with somebody, but it's only okay inside of marriage.
Right.
And acting on that outside of marriage is not biblical. It is sinful, downright, period. But the Lord obviously has forgiveness and grace for that. Like, if you've stepped out of that, hopefully, because I need it personally. But, like, it's okay, like, to desire those things. Like, the Lord knows your desires, but it's not okay to act on it at all. But I think it's just hard because sometimes you don't know what the boundaries are. But I think personally, like, I don't know how, like, graphic to get.
Yeah.
Like, how explicit to be. But, like, I feel like if you're doing things in, like, behind closed doors that kind of feel wrong, and you're in tune with the Spirit and, like, you're following the Lord, like, He'll kind of guide you.
Right.
And you'll get that feeling. And do not ignore that feeling. I feel like so many times I'd be like, oh, it's just butterflies. Girl, that is conviction. That is conviction. So, anyways, I believe that to be true. But
butterflies are not that.
They're not the Lord, so please. They are. They can be sometimes, but not in that situation I was describing. But yeah, so I feel like that's kind of a hard thing to answer, but that's just true. If you're doing things behind closed doors and it's making you feel weird, flee from that sexual immorality.
Yeah.
Get out of there.
That's good. I was going to say start with them. Like, don't just get into your relationship. We'll set boundaries along the way because you literally won't.
Yeah.
Like, you'll keep doing stuff, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, we've been doing this for 6 months. How do we stop now?
Yeah.
And there's grace and forgiveness for that. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like, how much easier is it if I step in this relationship and I'm like, okay, like, we both want to seek the Lord. Let's go ahead and talk about right now. Like, and convictions will come up. Like, there may be some things that you thought were okay, and now I'm convicted about it. We can't do this anymore. But it's like, there are things that at the beginning of a relationship, number one, that conviction or not, like, biblically, those things are wrong. So we need to talk about those. But also, like, if you already know you have personal convictions, talk about them before you even start. That way it's not like, now I'm in this situation. Is this okay? You know what I mean? Because it's like, how much more likely are you to talk about it and be honest beforehand than when you're in the moment and somebody says, is this okay? Like, you're just going to be like, oh, yeah, let's just keep going. It's fine, because it's hard.
It's hard and you don't want to make people mad.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say start with them. Like, it's so much easier when you start with them.
Right. And you set the expectation. And because I think sometimes, especially as girls, we tend to feel like if we don't, we're disappointing. Or if we don't, our boyfriend's gonna be mad, or if we don't, like, well, is he gonna go get it somewhere else? Like, what? But when the expectation is there, it's like they have the choice to do or not. And if they do, they know what they're getting themselves into, and it's not a surprise whenever something comes up and you're like, hey, actually, I don't like want to do this. And they're like, oh, because it's normal in the world.
Right.
And so that would be a shock for many people. But I think that's so good. But also, I wanted to read Matthew 5:27 and 28. It says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
Yeah.
And that is like crazy, right? To think about. And so the question of where the line is it's wherever you're sinning, wherever you're lustful. It's not, are you having sex? It's not, are you, like, doing this, or this? That's not the question. Because Jesus said that it is not just about committing adultery physically, although obviously it is about that, but it's not just about that. He said, let's take it back even harder. What's going on in your mind and your heart? That's what's important. And if it's taking you to the place of lust, there needs to be a boundary there, right? And that could even be when your boyfriend's not there.
Yeah.
Right? There are boundaries that need to happen for you, maybe. Don't take your phone to bed. Or there are boundaries that need to happen when you are with your boyfriend. Hey, we're not going to turn the lights out. Or once my parents go to bed, you're leaving. Whatever it is. The question is, what is bringing you to lust? Not what is like... this, and this. Like, these things are okay and these things are not, because... For one person, it might be okay, and for another, it might not, because some people, like, especially if you've never, like, experienced anything sexually, then there might not be as much of a strong desire, or it might not be as bad of a temptation. But if you've experienced before and want it again, then there's an extreme temptation there, right? And so for that person, the boundaries might look different than this person who's like, what? Like, y'all struggle with that? Like, I don't think many people are actually like that. But they might be for a little bit. And so boundaries do go off of personal convictions as well. And we don't get to change what the Bible says or add to what the Bible says by any means. But we do get to know that lust is a sin. And so if it's going on in your mind and your heart, then that's an issue.
Yep, it's true.
Right then and there.
Anything else?
I have my answers, but not the questions. Okay. So, what do I do when I've already gone too far with my boyfriend or girlfriend? And how do I pursue purity after that?
It's a good question.
Emma is laughing.
I'm busting at the seams.
Come on, Emma.
Okay, basically, this is really, I'm about to get on my stool. I feel like, for a long time, especially for girls in the church, like, well, this is such a cliche, but it's like, boys were going to go in the gym and talk about how to be pure, and girls were going to stay in here and talk about insecurity. And, like, talking about, like, lust, or, like, sexual morality, or, like, the temptation to, like, do, like, even if it's not with your boyfriend, but if it's, like, personal, like, lust, it's not talked about in the church. And I'm praying that changes, number one, but number two, I'm just here to say, like, that, like you said, like, it's a heart issue. And I was going to say this earlier, but, like, hello.
Sorry.
I feel like so often we neglect setting the boundary out of a place of, like, being timid or, like, wanting the approval of your boyfriend. But, like, the Lord commands us to be bold and, like, to seek his approval above all else. Like, you cannot please man and God. Right. So I feel like being bold and, like, setting that boundary is pleasing to the Lord, number one. But number two, if you've stepped outside of that, like, personally, I've done that. I know people in this room have. And it's hard because you feel so much shame for it, especially because it feels very, like, isolated. Like I said, like, nobody really ever talks about it. But first of all, people do struggle with it. The people that you would never expect struggle with it. And that, to me, is so freeing of, like, understanding that people that I love have walked through that is very, like, reassuring to me, because I felt so alone for so long. Like, I hid it for so long. And that only, like, grew the shame and bitterness and anger in my heart. But when I brought it to light, when I brought it under the authority of the Lord and I brought it to my community, it was only received with, like, grace and prayer and love. And that's what the Bible commands us to do, is to love one another like I have loved you. Right. And Jesus, when he met the adulteress on the floor, he didn't say, "You're so sinful. Like, why are you even here? Like, I'm glad they brought you here." He was like, "You can sin no longer." I'm pulling it up. I know where it is. Give me one moment. He was like, "You're going to sin no longer." And he told it. This is what he said. Only he, Jesus, was left with the woman and the sinner. When Jesus stood up, he said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord. Neither do I condemn you." That's Jesus. He said, "Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." Come on. And I feel like that's the word for the people that have lived in that. That's a word to myself that I've lived in that. Because it's a choice that you make every time you enter into a situation like that. And the moment that you say, "I'm not going to do this anymore," chains break, number one. And Jesus is smiling when you do that, y'all. And there is grace for that, but there's also blessing when you choose to walk in the Lord's covering in your relationship, I think.
Yeah. That's so good. It's good. So the question is, what do I do once I've gone too far with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and how do I continue pursuing purity after messing up?
I think, like, prioritizing, like, communication. Like, even if the conviction isn't on both sides, but you feel it very, very strongly on your side, like, you need to bring that up, and you need to just have that conversation and come with, like, biblical reasons behind it, even if they don't understand, because they might not understand. And so you just need to, like, tell them, like, it doesn't mean, like, we can't have this eventually, like, just where we're at right now, like, this can't happen. This can't be done. I just need to take a step back. And you have to be honest, and you have to expect a little bit of disappointment on their side, but ultimately they will understand if they are there to love you and to grow with you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I was listening to a podcast, the Handlebar podcast, and, like, this was the question of the podcast recently. And I loved the conversation that came from this. If you want to know more about this, go watch that episode. It was so good. Yeah. And one of the girls on there was, like, telling her personal experience with this, and she was telling a story about how she was, like, she was engaged to the man she's now married to. And she was like, we were very, like, passionate about each other. Like, genuinely, we just were. And when you're engaged, like, sometimes that's even harder because, like, you know you're going to be married. And so, anyway, they were engaged, and she was, like, nannying for the children of, like, a spiritual mom for her. And the woman got home, and the girl who, like, is telling the story, she was, like, washing dishes. And the woman, the mom, said, hey, how are you and such doing, like, with physical boundaries? And she dropped the plate and shattered it, like, in their sink. Because no one asked those questions sometimes. And that's something that, like, I try to, like, ask my friends, because I'm like, if I don't, no one else probably will. Right. And I had not been asked that for a long, long time. And so then it's like, of course it can grow in the dark, because no one's bringing it to light, because it's scary to bring that to light yourself. But when I say, hey, Emma, how are you and Luke doing, like, physically? And then it's like, oh, there's an open door here.
Yep.
And you can still choose to lie, of course.
Right,
but
of course.
it's so much easier to be honest when that question is asked. And so number one, I love that someone asked her the question, but then she was honest. And what I heard was the amount of grace she was met with. And these two people, she was leading worship at the time, and her fiance was a pastor at the time. And that was so freeing to me, because I think sometimes it can feel like, well, like you were saying earlier, it's the people you don't expect sometimes. Yeah. It can feel like, well, people are not, like, they would expect that from this person, but not from me. And so number one, I want you to know that, like Jesus, people should be meeting that with grace. True. And if they're not, that's their problem and not yours. And number two, you're not alone.
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
You're just not alone. Even as a girl, you're not alone. As someone who's in ministry, you're not alone. Like, there's just so many things. But I think a conversation has to happen, obviously. That's a non-negotiable, right? We've got to have a conversation. And I think also praying together about that is game changer. Yeah. It was game changer for me in my relationship. And then I think I want to take it back for the third thing, and I want to say, keep Christ at the center, just like we already talked about. Because if Christ is at the center, this is not of the Lord, right? We were reading the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5 recently in that Bible study. Yeah. And after each one of them in my commentary, I was telling the group about this. It said, like, it would say, like, lust, whatever, and it would, like, explain lust, and then it was like, this is not, like, present with the Lord, or something like that.
Like, the Holy Spirit will never lead you into that.
Yes, that's what it was, and that is so good.
So good.
So if Christ is at the center, truly,
right,
not just of your relationship, but of every single hangout, if Christ is at the center, you're never going to be led to that place.
Right, that's good.
And so I think that the answer, again, is not to say, what should I not do, but what should I do? And what should you do is pray together, communicate, invite the Lord into your time together, even if it's just, like, you're on the way to your boyfriend's house and you're like, God, like, please be with me today. Like, Amen. Let me feel your presence the whole time, because I promise you, the thing that will stop you in your tracks is the presence of the Lord over you. And you're like, oh, shoot. I'm not getting away with this one. Yeah. So I think that there's so much that just comes from inviting the Lord into what's going on. Absolutely. And it's important that you're both on the same page. Yeah. It really, really is. And that you would be very unequally yoked if you're not, in my opinion. And I walked through a season of that. And that was the hardest time to keep purity, because I was doing it on my own. I was like the oxen. I was carrying the load on my own. Yeah. But now I'm not, and it's so much lighter when I'm not carrying that alone. And so if your boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't have conviction and you do, that's also a conversation that needs to happen. And even more than that, because the conversation might not go well, but you need to let them know. But more than anything, you need to be going to war for them in prayer, that the Lord would show them and convict them, and that they would adhere to the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Because there's only so much you can say and do. Right. You can't change their heart. Right. You can change what's happening by stopping it, but you can't change their heart. Yep. And so just warring for them, that the Lord would change their heart in that area.
That's good. This has been a really long-winded question, so I'll keep it short. It's so important.
It's a good question.
And I feel like I don't have to harp on this as much anymore, because I love what you said about, like, talking about it, and it's not talked about enough. Like, if you let that stay in the dark, like, you can try to stop, but it's like, when it's in the dark, it just keeps festering. Like, it just keeps growing and growing, and then it's shame, and now I'm guilty, and, like, now I don't want to talk to anybody about it. Like, it's so much easier to just keep doing it if I'm never bringing it out into the light. So that's a really big one. I love that y'all talked about that. But also, the part of that question was, like, how do I keep pursuing purity? Okay, that was really hard to put the piece together. How do I keep pursuing purity after that? And I would say, like, it's almost like riding a bike. Like, you get back on and you just keep going. Like, I think we have to stop looking at it like, I messed up, it's tainted now. Like, I can't do it anymore. Like, it's never going to be as good as it was before. I'm imperfect. Like, you keep going. Like, the Lord isn't looking at you like, oh, she messed up. Like, that's a mark off. Like, you do it this time, it's not as good anymore, but you can try. It's like, he doesn't see it like that. He's like, come on, like, do it again. Like, please. Like, I still value this. I still love this. Like, I still want this. So it's good. Like, don't see it as, well, I messed up, it's not as good anymore. Like, keep going. Like, it still matters.
Yeah. The Lord is going to redeem it.
Yeah.
And that's so good. And something else they said in that podcast actually is that their mentors told them, you will walk into your wedding day and you will be pure. And I think that's so good.
Wow.
You will be pure on your wedding day.
Praise God.
That's so good.
Yeah.
The Lord is going to redeem it, and He's not focused on your mistakes the way that you are.
Right.
If you truly believe you're forgiven, and understand the forgiveness of the Lord, He's not focused on that.
Yeah.
He's focused on you and your well-being and your heart, and He just wants you to keep going, like you said, like riding a bike. Something I wanted to say, and I think I've kind of already touched on this, but I just want to say to the mentors that are listening, to the moms that are listening, to the people who are discipling young people who are listening, ask the question.
Yes.
It's awkward for both of you. I understand that. It's not just awkward for the young person answering, but it's necessary because it opens a door for freedom.
Right.
And it's hard to open that door on your own. But when somebody asks you, it's so much easier. I don't know. I just feel like I needed to say that. Like, ask the question, number one, and then number two, keep asking. Like, hey, okay, we've talked about this. Next week, I'm going to see how things are.
Yeah.
Guess what? Whenever things are just about to happen, I'm going to go, shoot, if I do this right now, I'm going to have to tell my mentor next week because I know she's going to ask me about it again. That's a level of accountability that is so great and so helpful. And there's something even more helpful about that with a mentor or a spiritual mother, father, than there is with a friend. Because it's like, especially a friend who maybe isn't super concerned about it. It's just a good way to be held accountable and for things to be brought to light. And so I think it's important that we ask the question and that we stop. Like, we have to stop letting there be a space where girls feel like they're alone. Where boys feel like they're alone, whatever, because they're not. Yeah. But we allow people to think they're alone because we're too afraid to say, hey, I struggled with that.
Yeah.
But until I'm willing to say, hey, I struggled with that, then that can't give her a stage to say, oh, I'm not alone, until I'm willing to say something. Yeah. And so if that's you, then, like, just be willing to say it because it might break chains for somebody else.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, the next question is, how do I prepare for a relationship in a season of singleness?
That's good.
Get it, Grace?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The first thing is just, like, making the Lord your priority, and just full focus, because, like, when you get into a relationship, you're not supposed to just drop the Lord and go to your guy or girl. You're supposed to have just a strong relationship with the Lord, and your boyfriend or girlfriend is supposed to come after him. So you need to just spend your singleness, like Paul just, like, you could be in singleness for a very, very long time. And just use that time to just strengthen your relationship with him. It's so, so sweet what he can do with that time. Just to hear his voice more and even, like, teach you. Like, you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend. You're without those temptations. So just taking that time to just learn, like, okay, where should I set boundaries when this does come up?
That's good. Or
what conversations should I have when I do meet a guy or girl that I like? And so I think that's just super, super important going into it.
It's good.
It's good. I feel like I've been summoned by Caroline's eyes, so I'm going to go. This is hard because I haven't been single in so long. Like, it's like, dang, what does that even feel like? But, and also, I think it's hard because I really didn't steward my singleness well when I was single. Right. So I think I'm just going to come at it from a point of, like, what would I do now if I could do it differently? Yeah. Because I think sometimes we spend so much of singleness, like, I hear it a lot in, like, girls' ministry, like, I just want a boyfriend so bad, like, whatever. And so then it's like, sorry, if you've said that to me, I love you, I'm sorry, don't be offended. But the first guy that comes along, we're like, there he is, I'll take that one. And I'm like, this guy? Like, really? You want that one? And so I think, like, number one, I've heard this a lot, like, making a list of, like, I'm not negotiating on these things. Like, that way when that man comes up and you're like, oh, but he's so cute and, like, whatever, it's like, and I'm not saying stupid stuff like he has to be 6'5" and like a football player. Like that's kind of crazy. Like I don't think that needs to be non-negotiable. But I'm talking about like, does he love the Lord? Does he serve the Lord? Like things like that. Like, would you trust him to pray over you? Like, is he, you know, what do his friends look like? Like things like that. Like things that actually matter and have like eternal weight, not what he looks like. That way you're not compromising on things that really matter. Like look for those things before you're just like, yeah, sure. And also just like you said, spending time with the Lord, because we can learn so much about what a relationship should look like from the Lord. Like the way that the Lord loves me is how I want to love you, and the way that you should love me. And so it's like, if I'm not intimate with the Lord, like I don't know love. I really don't. Like I don't know what love is supposed to look like. And so letting the Lord define that for you and teach you what that looks like will change the trajectory of your whole relationship.
That's good.
That's true.
That's good. I think same here. I've been single since a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, no need to share too much about that, but I think to prepare for a relationship is all the things y'all are saying. But it's just like, in your singleness, don't be so focused on a relationship.
That's good.
Right.
Because if you were meant to be in a relationship, you would be. And so, like, that's not what you're meant to be spending your time stressing about. Like, obviously, there's a reason for the season you're in, right? We believe that the Lord is sovereign and that he does everything for a purpose. And so why would I spend this purposeful season so worried about the next one to come? So what I would say is sit in it. Press into it. Lean into it. Lord, do you have something for me here? You know? He had something for her during that time, that what he had for me was different. And if she would have tried to press into what I was doing, or I would have tried to press into what she was doing, we would have been so, like, exhausted. But if you would just sit and where the Lord has you and trust that he is sovereign, then things are going to fall into place when they're meant to fall into place. But with that being said, like, don't be silly. It's okay to make that list, or to pray for your husband. Like, your mom would pray for her husband all the time, like written prayers for her husband before she ever met him. Like, do those things, but don't let it become an idol in your mind.
That's good.
Because it's never meant to be. Even when you are in a relationship, it's not meant to be an idol. And so to practice prioritizing the Lord in that season, and know that everything you're learning from him will flow into your relationship if you let it. So it's like anything you're learning, whether in a relationship or single, is going to flow into your relationship as long as it's flowing into your life. If you're really reading the word and taking it in and applying it to yourself, it's going to apply to your relationship as well. So you're benefiting your relationship by chasing the Lord. That's the biggest thing you can do, is chase the bridegroom. And learn who the bridegroom is. And what does it look like to be his bride. Because that's a special remnant that the Lord has set apart. So lean into that. I don't know. I think there's such a sweetness of relationships, but there's also such a sweetness of singleness. And it's a sacred space if you allow it to be. So I just don't want people to be so the way, like what you're talking about. Like, I just want a boyfriend so bad. I just want a girlfriend so bad. Like, all of our, like, middle school and high school guys have probably said that to me or someone else. And that's okay. Like, the Lord understands. He hears you. He knows your desire. But there's a reason that you're not in a relationship right now. And, like, just don't waste that time. I guess that's all that I'm trying to say, is don't waste the time. The season that you're in, don't take it for granted. Because there's a reason for it, as long as you allow the Lord to reveal it to you.
It's good.
And I love that you say, like, don't waste it, because I think, like, if I'm idolizing the idea of a relationship before I even get there, then, like, the Lord keeping me from a relationship isn't punishment, or it's not the Lord not having favor on me. That's protection, because I'm not ready. Like, if I'm already idolizing a person that isn't even in my midst yet, imagine when they get there. Like, imagine how much of an idol that's going to become in my life. If, like, I finally get this thing that I've coveted for so long, like, I'm going to go nuts. Because I'm going to be so excited. And so it's like, it's the Lord protecting me from the point of, you're not ready yet. Like, it needs to be me and you for a while. Like, that's so tender. Like, that's so kind of him.
It's, to me, that's why, like, I can't talk about it without smiling, because to me it sounds like intimacy with Jesus, which I've learned how to have in a relationship, and you still can, and don't for a second believe that you can't have intimacy with the Lord in a relationship, but it's like laying the groundwork of that.
That's good.
And it's just such a sweet and tender place. So, yeah.
That's good.
It's good. Love that.
Real quick, I want to go back to Jenna's of the list. And like, it's I think it's great to make the list just so you have a record of it and you can look back or always add to it. But I think it's important to just like send it to your biblical community.
Right.
That's something
That was
I
such
did with
good
Caroline.
advice. Yeah.
Just because like, when you start to really, really like someone, like, you're going to get blinders, and
Yeah.
you're going to be like,
Come on.
they're so cute, they're so sweet, like, everything about them is amazing, and you're just going to forget, like, oh, they don't check this box on my list. And they might not check everything on your list the second you meet them, but, like, you want them to check your non-negotiables.
Right.
That's good.
And so send it to your community so that, like, they can keep you accountable, and they don't have those blinders on and can just say, like, hey, I don't see this. So I just want you to be thinking about that.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing it out to you.
That's so
really
good.
Grace.
That's so good. Okay. Number 8. How do I get over a simple past relationship so that I can find the one God has for me? I don't know if that's saying get over the person or get over the sin.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. Maybe we could address both
Okay, yeah.
together
Yeah, let's do it.
because I don't want to miss it,
Mm-hmm.
like any part of that.
Right.
That's good. Caroline, are you stewing? You want to go?
I'm stewing. But I'm not ready.
Okay. Man, yeah, I typed out these questions. I remember reading that and I was like, ooh, that's something right there,
Yeah.
you know? I will say, I think that sometimes, once again from personal experience, we get out of a relationship that wasn't meant for us. Like, I think we have good intentions. Like, we do good on the walking out of if that relationship is sinful, you do good on the walking out part. But I think sometimes we get so caught up on okay, what's next? Like, I got to find the next one. Or it's like, especially if you broke up with that person for a reason of they don't check this box or they don't do these things or they don't point me to the Lord. It's like, I lay my eyes on somebody that does, and I'm like, you're the answer. I'm like, you will solve this. You'll put me back together. Like, yeah, I just messed up. He wasn't it, but you are. And so it's like we just jump ship right into the next thing.
Yeah.
Like, we get so caught up in the looking for the next relationship. But sometimes it's not the next relationship that the Lord wants you to behold. The Lord wants you to behold Him. He's like, we're done with this. Like, we don't need this right now. I want you to just focus on me for a while. He's like, I didn't free you up from that relationship so you could hop into the next one. I freed you up from that so that we could be together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that once again, so I could show you what it looks like to be the bride of Christ, right? So there is a relationship out there for you 100% for the person that asked that question. I'm not saying don't pray about that or don't worry about it. I'm just saying that sometimes it's not, I need to get over this so I can move on to the next one. It's, I'm going to seek Christ and He will help me.
And that's how you're going to get over
that.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say is like, that's how you overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not getting on to the next thing. It's seeking Christ, and you'll overcome that.
Right.
So, just, I guess, mainly it's like talking about entering into singleness again or just being single, like after a relationship. One of my biggest struggles leaving a relationship was, and I didn't even bring it to light myself, but it was brought aware to me. It was like finding so much of my identity in that relationship instead of in the Lord. And so that's what I spent so much of my time with the Lord in that singleness, was just like, hey, I'm yours. Like, I was never His. I was never like, I idolized Him too much. And so it's just like finding a part of me, because if I felt like I was missing a part of me because I found it in Him and not the Lord. And so just like fully putting my eyes on the Lord so that I didn't have that. And so as soon as I did that and got better at it, because it was so hard, like I like no longer miss that person because that's all I cared about them, because they gave that to me. And so when you like separate those things, it becomes so much easier.
That's good.
That's good. I feel like I have something to say, but I don't know. Like, I feel like I should have something to say, but I don't know what it is. So, stay tuned. Maybe I'll write about it if I come up with something later. Okay, the last question is, any additional scriptures or outside resources that have helped you in your godly relationships?
I'll go first. So, I feel like scripture-wise, I really have clung, especially coming from, like, I'm still in the current relationship that I've, like, fell into temptation in, but I feel like I truly believe, like, the Lord can redeem relationships like that. And that's through, like, discernment and prayer, like, just revelations that he's given me of, like, you know, this is yours to stay in, and I'm going to bless it, and I'm going to be with y'all. But I love when the Bible talks about, like, freedom. Obviously, that's just so, like, it literally frees me up, like, when I read it, because I don't have to live. I'm going to read it, because this is what I need to say. This is John 8. I love John. What's wrong? I'm going crazy. Okay. John 8, 30 through... We're going to go around the 40s. So this is Jesus talking to his disciples and to the Jews. He's saying, if you continue in my word, you really are my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Amen. Skip down a little bit, and they're like, Jesus, we are not enslaved to anyone. Like, how can we become free? And he's like, you are a slave to sin. Everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. But the good news of the gospel, literally, if the Son sets you free, you will really be free indeed. Yeah. And that applies to not only our relationships, but also, like, just our lives. Like, if you truly are enslaved to sin, the Lord will set you free. I truly believe that. And then it goes on to talk about, like, we have one Father, and he is God. And Jesus is like, if God's really your Father, you would love me. So, like, I think kind of talking about, like, if you have a Christ-centered relationship truly, your true love is Jesus. It's not your relationship, it's Jesus. And he'll bless you with those things that, like, you have the desire to have. Like, the Lord knows the desires of your heart, and if it aligns with his word, he'll grant it. But, like, our first love should be Jesus always. And I think, like, an outside resource that's really helped me is obviously, like, biblical community, but it's also, like, kind of like I was talking about earlier, like, knowing that other people have gone through this, and it's not a shameful topic. That's of the enemy. Like, if you feel shame and not freedom, that's the enemy trying to manipulate your sin and your past. The Lord redeems it. He uses it for his glory, which I'm so thankful for. But I think just, like, people, the outside resource is honesty and vulnerability. Like, people being honest about it has really, like, blessed my relationship personally.
Yeah. That's good.
It's good.
I think for me a big thing has been podcasts, and I feel like I talk about podcasts all the time. But there just are good podcasts for it out there.
Yeah.
And so that's just something good to do, in my opinion. Like, if you're struggling, there's podcasts about it or like episodes about it on almost all the podcasts I listen to, whether it be Well That's Good, the Hannah Ward podcast, like whatever. Like, people are talking about it. People are talking about relationships. I think that's something we talk about often, even if we don't talk about the sexual part often. I think we talk about relationships often as, like, the church. And so there's definitely, like, people out there talking about it on podcasts and things like that. There's also always great sermons.
Yeah.
There's great events for things like that. Like, here we have a marriage conference, which is really sweet. So I think that there are so many resources out there. Just look, you know, whether it be a podcast or something like that. As when it comes to, like, things that are out there on the internet, there's so much of it. Just make sure that what you're looking at or going to is based on the Bible and the Bible alone, and that it is the authority. Number one, and then number two, I think that a huge resource for me has been conversations with people. And again, that goes back to the importance of being the one who's willing to say, hey, I screwed up. I screwed up and I'm over it now, so now I can help you. Yeah. Or, hey, I screwed up and I need you to help me. Yeah, whatever it is. It's just very, very important. And I'm just really thankful for the people who were willing to say that to me. Yeah. Willing to say, hey, I screwed up. Like, it's so sweet. And it really does bring such depth even to your relationships. And so, I don't know, there's so many things out there, so many people. Having a mentor is so important when it comes to dating, I would say. I think it's important to anything. Having a mentor has been absolutely one of the most important things I've done in my walk with the Lord. And so having a mentor allows someone to speak into what they see especially a mentor who knows you both. And it's okay to have multiple mentors, multiple people speaking into you, but to have somebody who knows you both is really special because they can speak into your side and their side because they see both of you and they know your hearts and things. So I would say that that's like something that's really important too.
That's good.
I wanted to bring up like a very popular book, and that's by Ben Stewart. It's called Single, Dating, Engaged, and Married. Being so honest, I've only read the dating part, but I think it's great to do like just start to finish. It's a goal of mine to do, just to get that. Yeah. Just because it's good to like just have that in mind, like going forward. But a verse or a chapter that came to mind is Proverbs 31, specifically 10 through 31, because it's titled "The Woman Who Fears the Lord," and it just describes a woman and like all that she does for her family, for her husband, and just like her doing so is for the Lord completely. But I love verse 30 where it says like charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so that's just like knowing your worth in the Lord before anything else, because you put your time and your focus in him, just to better yourself. Like in that time of singleness, like yes, you're focusing on the Lord, but you're also like bettering yourself to be that wife. You can't have those expectations for your husband if you're not disciplining yourself. So.
Yeah. That's good. That's actually something that, like, you reading that made me think of a person I know in real life who is, like, a Proverbs 31 woman. And so something else I would say, I keep talking, but something else I would say is to have, like, when you see that couple that it's, like, their love is for the Lord, and it is honoring, and she's submitting, and he is, like, loving her well and leading well, and when you see that, like, let those people into your life. And even if it's just not you having like a sit down conversation with them, but just like getting to experience them. You know what I'm saying? Them just being them just being the parents that they are, the wife, the husband that they are. That really has been such a help to me. Like I can just think of I was in this woman's house and I was just not even having a conversation with her. Like she was just doing her own separate thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like the Lord is ministering to me so hard through just watching her exist right now. Learning how to be a wife from her. So I think that's really good to like Proverbs 31, but also Proverbs 31 women in your life. Like if you're a woman, let them show you how to be that. And if you're a man, like, find the godly husband and let him, like, just learn from him in any way you can. Yeah.
It's good.
Do you have any other things to add? Okay. I think that was super good. Thank you guys for preparing and seeking the Lord. And thank you guys for listening. We love you. Thank you for sending in questions. We love doing Q&As. It's so fun. So... we're excited for the season 3 Q&A. We're counting down the days. But we love you guys, and we are just so honored to be able to minister to you guys. And I hope that you have an amazing week. See you next Friday.